Thank you. You have the floor, sir.
Good morning. Just to give you some background about my practice, my firm started in the mid-'80s in Chicago as a boutique firm in defending manufacturers of consumer industrial products and product liability litigation. We're now in 8 cities, and our practice, we have about 150 lawyers. And my practice is primarily centered or been focused on the automotive industry, which is how I have some reason to talk about autonomous vehicles today. But I also represent a number of manufacturers of medical devices. One of my clients makes the Da Vinci surgical robot. So when it comes to artificial intelligence, autonomous vehicles, it's kind of consistent with what, albeit that new technology is not something I've traditionally done. But some of the legal themes and theories of liability, the law is much more advanced than the technology. We think about artificial intelligence as the most advanced technology, but it's still controlled and still in the grasp of certain legal principles that make those companies engaged in artificial intelligence design and the manufacture of products depending upon that kind of high technology, subject to the same liability laws as from the old horse and buggy days or steam engines that Abraham was discussing. So what? Thank you. My clientele, at least in the automotive industry, has included a lot of the Japanese companies. I've served as defense counsel for Toyota and Honda, Mazda, Mitsubishi, Subaru in Europe, Volvo, BMW, Porsche. So those are some, and I've defended them in crashworthiness, serious catastrophic injury cases that apply the laws of the different states of the United States where the lawsuit is brought. There are some common themes and some minor distinctions in product liability law from Illinois, where I'm from, compared to New York or Tennessee or Florida. But the same liability themes seem to stand out, and it's going to apply to autonomous vehicles. It's going to apply to nanotechnologies and consumer and industrial products. It's going to apply to surgical robots. And so some of these same themes that I've traditionally been using in defending products of my clients over the years, we're going to see in courtrooms throughout the United States as being the focus of liability on some of these advanced technologies. So let's get started. Which button is this here? Okay. What are some of the products that we find in the autonomous or artificial intelligence sphere? Well, obviously automobiles, and I'm going to spend a little bit more time on that because that seems to have much more consumer appreciation of autonomous vehicles themselves, but we have surgical robots. We're even going to anticipate, we do anticipate, that artificial intelligence is going to be used for legal research, which may mean lawyers under the age of 35 won't have a job. We're seeing it now in medical research when it comes to collaborative exchange of advances in medical technology in medical research, where doctors can become more aware of the most advanced techniques in medical care by this self-learning, by this continuing expression of updates of technology, instead of through the more traditional ways of reviewing articles. Doctors are going to be able to get that information every day of the new advances, the new techniques in surgery. We have pilotless aircraft and robots. I'm not sure if any of you are familiar with robots that you see in an automotive assembly plant that do welding, but we now have robots in Amazon warehouses that literally travel and pick the inventory and bring it to a central bin for forwarding the customer's order, as opposed to relying exclusively on a human to go walking around the warehouse, find the different objects, and then bring it to the central bin. And so we're seeing this more and more, and I think it's making many people frightened, but it's my view, it's going to enhance safety, it's going to enhance efficiency, but it has its drawbacks because it may make the human worker who has been engaged in certain administrative or ministerial tasks not have that kind of responsibility in the future. Okay, what are the liability claim themes for product liability? I'm sure it's very consistent here in Europe, but there are 3 forms of product liability, of theories that are brought in lawsuits in the United States and other jurisdictions. Defective design, that is that the actual design itself was flawed or inadequate in some way, which causally led to someone's injury. That the individual product itself was manufactured in a defective way or an inadequate way, inconsistent with the plans or specifications or drawings for that product. And the third theme, which is the most common theme that we see in American product liability litigation, is that the warnings on product warnings or in the operator's manual did not disclose the existence of a latent or not grossly obvious hazard of the product itself. So those are, you will see in most lawsuit complaints in the United States, most commonly defective design and always inadequate or defective warnings. The defective manufacturer is not as common in litigation that we see, but that still occurs as well. Okay. Okay, now, can you help me with that? Which button did you push? The center button, right? Okay.
You got it.
There we go. Defective design. Well, we're going to find in autonomous vehicles some subparts of criticisms of the design of the vehicle that could relate to its underlying software, the data security where hackers can come in and have some impact or can affect on an individual unit or even the design as a whole of all the makes, of all the models that are manufactured by the vehicle manufacturer. We know from the advanced technologies in automobiles today, even though they're not autonomous, there are sensors about our newer makes of vehicles. The placement of those sensors when it comes to crash avoidance could be the subject of the design defect claim. Inadequate sensor data, inadequate pattern recognition, and for autonomous vehicles, collision avoidance algorithms. Let me talk a little bit about the industry of the development of autonomous vehicles. There are probably about 20 companies, a third of them are not even automotive manufacturers, that are engaged in research and development of autonomous vehicles, algorithms, softwares. The manufacturing part of the vehicles is the easy part, because the car companies know what they're doing when it comes to manufacturing the product. But there's underlying softwares, underlying algorithms. We have Google involved, a company called Waymo, even Uber, whom most of us are familiar with. Why would Uber want to get involved in autonomous design vehicles? Well, long-term, there's a profit motive they would have, because if they don't have to pay the drivers, if the vehicle itself is self-driving, they make more money. So when we consider what are the motivations of these, why would Ford Motor Company, why would Volvo, why would these car companies want to invest so many billions of dollars? Well, it's because of lawsuits. If they can take human error out of the equation on the roadways of Europe and Japan, the United States, they're less likely to become sued. Obviously, there's an enhanced product quality, public interest by having safer vehicles on the roadway. But they spend literally in the United States millions and millions of dollars in attorney's fees and injury claims and verdicts against these car companies. So there is a public interest, clearly. In the United States, we have approximately 35,000 roadway deaths every year. The goal of autonomous vehicles is to reduce that number dramatically, which is good for society, but for the profit potentials, for the car companies, it's good for them too, because they don't have to pay guys like me. Okay? So really, and I think that's part of the corporate environment in all countries, and it's been going on for years and years. So that's okay too. I'm really having trouble with this one. Yeah. Here we go. So what are some of the, I was talking moments ago about defective design. What are different themes or theories that can be made in claims involving defective manufacturing. Well, LiDAR is the sensor system, to be, I'm sure as basic as I can be, that prevails. It's kind of a radar system that prevails in vehicles today, and it's going to get more and more advanced as autonomous vehicles are developed, where the car is going to be able to reduce its speed spontaneously. The car is going to accelerate spontaneously for collision avoidance. And so if that LiDAR system and the sensors are defectively positioned, but more in manufacturing defect claim that they fail in some way, then the car company, and that's who's going to be sued. In the United States, the car companies are going to be sued, as opposed to an insurance company. And most of the car companies are self-insured. They have bigger assets than the insurance companies, but some will have insurance programs as well. But if the arrays and sensors fail in some way, the brackets where the sensors are supported on the vehicle fall off or maladjusted during the course of being on the roadway, well, that could lead to an accident. Software data accumulation failures, mechanical or physical defects. These are the kind of claims that we find in product liability manufacturing defect claims, and obviously electrical system defects. And defective and inadequate warnings, as I mentioned before, that is commonly found in most every product liability lawsuit I've defended over the past 40 years, whatever, 30 years. And if something goes wrong and it's not in the operator's manual, or it's not on a product label in the vehicle itself, some kind of hazard sticker, well, then that becomes a theme of accusing the car company of not doing its acting responsibly in its designing and manufacturing the vehicle. So oftentimes, when there is a warning in an operator's manual, even a sticker on the vehicle or on the product itself, they say it was confusing or inadequate in some way to try to keep the case alive. So that's what we see. So what are the different lawsuit complaint theories that are pleaded? One is strict product liability, and the underlying rationale for that in the U.S. law is even if the car company did everything right, did all the testing that other car companies would do, has all the advances in technology, if somebody got hurt, and it can be attributable to some failure of the design, what may not necessarily be catastrophic with every person, but in this particular incident, then the allegation is that the product is defective and unreasonably dangerous, and it was causally related to the injuries that the passenger or the driver sustained. Other theories similar to what we have here in Europe, with negligence, breach of warranty, misrepresentation of material facts, and breach of contract. But the theme in the United States for negligence is what a reasonably careful manufacturer would have done under the same circumstances. It's kind of like a standard of care theme as opposed to what that particular car company did. So it assesses the overall state of the art of the industrial community, of that specific industry, and those are the themes. You'll find typically in product liability lawsuits in not just Chicago, but around the states, defective design and strict liability, inadequate warnings and strict liability, and you also find similar claims made in negligence. So what are some of the practical considerations? Autonomous vehicle manufacturers and those that are developing the software and the algorithms for it recognize it's never going to be a safe technology. It will never be a safe technology in the real world unless there's adequate consumer education. But there have been a few accidents, which Abraham can talk about, I'm sure, as intelligently as I can, of experimental autonomous vehicles on the roadways in the United States that have led to accidents. But what we have found in each of those few accidents is that there is still a human element. The purpose of autonomous vehicles is to avoid human engagement, avoid the prospect of human error. But what we found in these first ones is there's a sense of complacency, a lack of attention to the roadway of the driver that's sitting behind the wheel in the semi-autonomous vehicles. But there is going to have to be serious consumer education so people understand that this is not an immune and immunity, that they are immune from ever being involved in a serious car crash that can lead to serious injury or death. And so what we expect, and we've found so far in the experimental vehicles, that there's this development of complacency by the driver, because they think that they really don't have to keep their attention on the roadway. One terrible pedestrian crash, which occurred in Arizona, involved was it the Uber vehicle, or I can't remember if it was the Uber vehicle or not.
Uber.
And the driver, it was still, the technology of the vehicle still required the driver to engage in emergency measures to avoid a crash. But what was this person doing? She was so reliant, so dependent on the vehicle itself that she was texting. And so when this pedestrian and a bike and bicycle in a roadway at night essentially walked in front of her vehicle, she did not engage in the necessary avoidance maneuver to avoid the crash and killed this woman. So they're not fail-safe systems, and especially not yet. And if this aura of complacency or lack of attention, over-reliance on the technology, we could still have tragic events occur. And there is essentially a false sense of security, which is what is still in this stage of autonomous vehicle design. We recognize there's still the human engagement or intervention is still necessary, and the safety is not measures, the design is not fail-safe. And of course, the vehicles themselves still have to be structurally strong. They still have to be crash-worthy, because there's still going to be some kind of incidents, where someone, for example, a human is driving a car, stop in front of that vehicle at a stoplight is an autonomous vehicle and gets rear-ended. So those people can still get hurt, even though they're in an autonomous vehicle. Is the vehicle crash-worthy to promote safety when it comes to the design? So, what are the liability challenges for the industry, and frankly for our clients who are going to be having not so necessarily autonomous vehicles that they manufacture, but autonomous products that they have on assembly lines, in warehouses? How is society going to be able to deal with this, and especially in the liability world? So there still will be product liability litigation. There's going to be significant regulatory issues. The United States government has a federal agency called the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration. And it has asked the states of the United States, the state governments, to not legislate regulations and statutes that would inhibit the development of autonomous vehicles or inhibit the development of artificial intelligence as we're in this early or embryonic stage of development, because the different liability laws of each of the 50 states can truly inhibit or slow down or compromise the advances of artificial intelligence when it comes to consumer and industrial products. There are cybersecurity issues, privacy issues, as Abraham talked about, contractual issues with suppliers, and that's where many of the people in this room may be called upon to counsel their clients when it comes to vendors that provide products from them that are created by artificial intelligence, or your clients are providing to the marketplace products that or services that are reliant upon artificial intelligence. So there's going to be a lot of legal issues that arise in the years to come. And there's the ethical concerns. I want to spend just a couple minutes talking about that. What are the ethical and societal concerns? I remember seeing films from the 50s and 60s about these robots, and they were viewed in science fiction films as particularly dangerous, and actors in society. But what's more likely that we're going to see when it comes to artificial intelligence or robots is the eradication of jobs, or the dramatic alteration of the relationship that employees have with their employers. Let me give you a good example. Let's just talk about autonomous vehicles for a second. In the United States, it is estimated, and this is probably a very conservative estimate, that 1.5 million people are involved in driving vehicles in U.S. highways, railroads, taxi drivers, truck drivers, train engineers. All those people arguably will not have jobs. And what role do we as a society, and what role does our government have to protect those jobs and protect those people? The advances in technology, we cannot stop that because that will hurt a growing society. It will hurt growing economies. But at the same time, we all have to ask ourselves questions. Are we really helping society and those people that may not be the most educated, those people that may not be the most sophisticated in the technologies? What do we do for them? And the income disparity that exists in Western economies now, and differences in job descriptions and the eradication of certain jobs in certain industries, especially involving environmental issues, what does society do for our own? And those are the legal and ethical concerns that I think all of us, whether you're a software developer or not, an algorithm creator or not, that we all have a vested interest in this new technology. Because the members of our societies are the ones, not just the consumers who are going to buy the car, but the consumers who rely on those certain kinds of technologies that they use that are more basic than the artificial intelligence world provides. They will be deeply affected by it. There will be wealth inequality, greater ones, lost jobs, and a diminution in intimacy of professional relationships that will occur in the same place. I have an article from the Chicago Tribune that was published, a newspaper, about a week ago. And one small manufacturer has bought what's called cobots. These are machines that do visual inspection of manufactured components, which was typically done by employees that did visual inspections. Now these cobots have a much higher reliability of finding, by way of quality control, any flaws in the components themselves. But what that employer has done, and I offer this example to give some degree of optimism, he has not let anybody go. He has kept them on their working at the company, but in less boring and more interesting responsibilities. So he hasn't hired more people as his business has grown. He's relying on these cobots to improve the quality control of his products, but he has a higher level of satisfaction of the employees he has at his company. And that became a newspaper article. That should be routine. And that's the challenge that I think that the international business community has when it comes to artificial intelligence. So,
5 minutes.
Very good, we'll keep it. There are concerns regarding whether artificial intelligence can be abused, can be used in a way that'll harm society, militarily, politically, economically, and of course socially, as I mentioned some minutes before. There will be political and economic and social ramifications by development of these kinds of devices that are intended to help society, but will have a side effect of also potential harm. So, what are the conclusions? I'm going to keep it within the 5 minutes here.
Thank you.
Great. We can expect, if I have this crystal ball in front of me, I think we can expect greater efficiency of manufacturing and services in the years to come because of artificial intelligence. We will make better products, we will provide better services, we will have a more safer environment in the workplace and in our highways and in our homes. I believe consumer safety will be enhanced because of artificial intelligence. The autonomous vehicle is expected. Once we have all these vehicles on the roadway and we reduce the human intervention, we should have fewer roadway deaths and fewer catastrophic injuries. The liability risks, which is what lawyers like to think about when they talk about, I believe the liability risk to the car companies or the manufacturers of other products who are relying on artificial intelligence will increase. There will be more lawsuits. There will be more controversies played out in courtrooms instead of boardrooms, instead of in software development laboratories. Well, that will happen, and I believe it'll continue until the existing products and systems advance and they adapt to the AI world. The AI design improves to adapt to real-world characteristics, and the consumer community, as I said earlier, recognizes that AI is not fail-safe. That does not immunize one from serious injury or harm or economic loss. It still requires an understanding that there are some limitations, even though there may be self-learning, there may be deep learning of this software, but it'll take a while before we really get rid of it. So.